Welcome back. Now let's get the show on the road. Recently, President Muhammadu Buhari has entered the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, which was passed by the National Assembly. For 30 years, the Nigerian business climate has operated under the authority of the Companies and Allied Matters Act, CAMA 1990. Some Nigerians have applauded the government for amending the act. However, some provisions in the new act are not appealing to non-governmental organizations, NGOs. So, let's look at the pros and cons of this new act. To do that with us this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome, joining us from our Abuja studios, Chukwuemeka Eze, who is a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigerians.
We have an economist with us, Mr. Tokwe Fashua. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. You never seem to come to Lagos anymore. Now, this act has been hailed by the chambers of commerce and all that, but some people are screaming blue murder. Do you think that this bill is something, this act, sorry, is something for us to be excited about? Mr.
Is that to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine. I think it's a good bill, given the fact that I think the last time it was touched was around 2004. And, you know, from time to time, you have to look at some of the issues it's a good act, you know, in the law and make amends, especially to conform with the times. So in terms of, you know, how it tries to position Nigeria for this ease of doing business and encouraging young people to own businesses and entrepreneurship and so on. Yes, it is good. Part of the provisions in that area includes allowing a single person to own a company, a single shareholder, things like limited liability partnerships, also taking a lot of things to the e-platform, allowing private companies to hold you know, digital EAGMs. You know, you don't have to gather people, which also conforms with the COVID season. Also expunging things like, if you like, you know, the appointments of auditors for small companies, appointments of secretaries and even AGMs for small companies. So all of those things, they sound very good. On the AML side, the money laundering, anti-money laundering side, we saw that they have a provision for companies to disclose beneficial ownership, to actually say who exactly owns this company. If people are holding shares, you need to be able to say, are the shares yours, or are you holding on behalf of someone, and so on. And then, of course, they want to know who is the major shareholder of any company. So all of these are good, and I think we're now thinking about the age of transparency. And I think one of the things that this COVID season has taught us is the need to be more transparent, for that a lot of things are going into the, if you like, the cyberspace, and everybody is going to have to open up. But people, this is almost 870 provisions in this law. And at some point, it became a bit controversial in terms of what the plans are for NGOs. And of course, we see that our churches are complaining. And in fact, the issue there is that whereas I'm in favor of disclosure and financial transparency on behalf of the NGOs, including churches, mosques, and so on, but I think that the bill was a bit silent on the issue of financial transparency. What we should be asking them to do is to say, listen, disclose, just as this is done elsewhere, whether in the US or in the UK, they have the Charities Commission. This has been a controversial issue in Nigeria for a while now. But the bill wasn't very explicit on the need for disclosure, but went for the jugular in terms of saying that we can remove your trustees, we can appoint anybody we want, and so on. And so people, this folks are actually protesting that you can't bring an outsider to come and supervene over our spiritual organizations, if you like. So, but by and large, I think it's a good initiative. The House of Reps committee has asked them, I think the spokesman of the House of Reps has asked them that, look, if you don't like this, you can also still move for an amendment. I would suggest that they think in terms of, how they can collaborate. The CAC should be able to collaborate with these NGOs where things go wrong in order to appoint trustees, which can still be from the NGOs, not totally to bring outsiders to supervise some of these NGOs.
Mr. Eze, what's your take on this new act, Mr. Eze, being a lawyer?
Yes. I've done a little SWOT analysis on the new act. I've looked at the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And looking at small and medium enterprises, I think they have a lot of advantages. For the first time, this new act has allowed NASME, Nigeria Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, to have a representative in the Governing Council of the Corporate Affairs Commission, pursuant to Section 2, subsection 2B of the new Act.
Okay.
And it's a novel situation
Mr. Eze,
because people at the lower part of the ladder have been so concerned that they have not been properly integrated in the scheme of doing business.
okay.
Since
Mr. Eze, if you can just
2016,
hold your thoughts, Mr. Eze, we'll just take a moment and come back to continue your focus on the pros and cons of this new act. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Festus Akimbewa is already talking. He says, it's amazing that religious bodies and NGOs are registered and regulated in the United Kingdom, and many of our Nigerian churches have to comply with the laws or be kicked out. He says he expects the new CAMA legislation to be implemented to the fullest. Mr. Eze, you were talking about the pros and the cons. You started out looking at how the small and medium enterprises now have some more bite or have been empowered to get more out of service delivery. Please go on.
Yes. NASME has a representative in the Governing Council of the CAC, pursuant to Section 22B of the new Act. Yes, beside that, the cost of registration has been reduced. So the cost of registration of companies, they have been reduced. Then one shareholder can form a company, but the shareholder must not be less than 18 years if one shareholder must form a company. So that has to be taken into consideration. Then Section 860 has provided for electronic evidence. So the era of in compliance with the digital age, the era of insisting on paperwork wherever, whenever is gone. So things you send by email, WhatsApp, all of them are acceptable and admissible. Even shares, by virtue of Section 176 of the new CAMA, electronic share certificates are acceptable in the system. Appointment of auditors pursuant to Section 402 of the new CAMA is not compulsory for small companies and companies of one person. But I need to, perhaps by way of caveat, alert those who think that they cannot appoint auditors, that it is a carte blanche. It is not really a carte blanche. They have to watch it. There is a trap there. Because if you look at under the new regulations, once you register any entity, you will get a taxpayer's identification number. So if you are getting conversant with CAMA, you must also get conversant with the the Companies Income Tax Act, CETA, the Personal Income Tax Act, they are not mutually exclusive as some people may think. The implication is that your tax liability may begin to run as soon as you register. And as such, Section 63 of CETA, Companies Income Tax Act, empowers Federal Inland Revenue Service to dictate how account books can be prepared. So, and by way of legal interpretation, when there is a general law like CAMA and there is a specific law like CETA in relation to taxation, the court will pick the provisions of CETA to override the provisions of CAMA. So, since by virtue of Section 23 of CETA, of the Finance Act, Section 23, so Section 9 of the Finance Act has amended Section 23 of CETA and provided that small companies, that is, companies of 25 million naira and below turnover should not pay companies income tax. How will you know that your turnover if you don't have an auditor? So on paper, you may think an auditor is irrelevant, but in reality, for you to know your turnover, whether you belong to a small company or you belong to a medium one, that's above 25 million naira, but less than 100 million naira, it is an auditor that we put the papers across to tell you where you belong. And remember that even when you don't pay companies income tax, the proviso, there is a proviso that you must be filing returns and you are subject to payment of late penalties for late filing. Unknown to some people, if they don't do the filing as required by CETA, and you are one person, you have formed a company, you refuse to file returns, you relax. You may discover at the end of the year you would have paid a lot of money as penalties. So anybody reading CAMA should as well be reading the Companies Income Tax Act. That's why I started by saying we'll do, that I'm doing the SWOT analysis, the strength. As we look at the strength, you are not compared to appoint an auditor, yes. What of the threat? The threat is that if you don't use an auditor, you may not know where you belong to. You may not know your turnover, and you may not know how to apply or implement the law, especially the provision of Section 40 of CETAs is presently represented as per small companies, medium companies, and large companies. So back to CAMA, you do not need a lawyer to file a declaration of compliance in court, which used to be the case. A statement of compliance by a director or shareholder or whoever, or secretary or any agent of the company will be sufficient. So one need not. So presently, one can actually register any of these entities without using a lawyer. I think that is one of the innovations. The controversial areas, as my colleague has said, in UK, you have the UK Charities Organization. I think too much powers have been given to CAC. There ought to have been a charity organization, charity regulator dealing with NGOs and religious organizations, allowing those handling business names, companies incorporation, limited liability partnerships, and limited partnerships, to also be the same people that will be dealing with NGOs, and I think it will be too much for them, and they may not handle it well.
There should be proper separation.
There should be an amendment really taking care of some of these areas.
Okay, Let's go back a little bit. Tokpa, if you can weigh in on this, that matter of the taxes. If indeed going by the new CAMA, the CAMA 2020 and the CETA Act, then a lot of these small businesses that may have been rejoicing already with the new act might just find themselves going under, because if they are supposed to be making returns, there are many of them that are registered but haven't made any returns whatsoever, haven't had any business. And indeed, if I do remember correctly, you're given some period of grace before you start to make your returns. But with this new law, that will be out of the window, as the case may be. And then those companies will now begin to find out that I'm owing some millions, meanwhile I haven't done any business whatsoever. What should they be doing with this new act that's coming now?
Right, thank you, Nota. As Barrister Eze has said, I think everybody should look out for the pitfall. Don't assume you don't owe taxes at all if you haven't done your account. So except you do your account to know where you fall, whether you are small, businesses or something that have been exempted from taxation, 25 million turnover and below, according to the Finance Act 2020. That is a provision. It's a new specific law that was made for that reason. However, when we talk about CAC returns, that is different. The returns to CAC basically just says that if you let the CAC know the status of your company every year, whether or not it's different from taxation return. Let me put it this way. In Nigeria for now, the law does not ask you to send your financials to CAC, but there are things that your lawyer can do for you, and maybe you can even do it for yourself. Lawyers and accountants, they fill a returns form. It used to be about 3,000 naira or thereabout. Every year, it will update CAC. If you have appointed new directors, you will say. If you have moved your addresses, the CAC needs to know. I did business in the UK, or ran a company in the UK for about 8 years. I know how it works. The company house is quite powerful in the UK. The CAC is only just trying to get up to that level. So the way it works in the UK and even elsewhere, including the UAE, where I know, is that every year a company, the first thing you do is to intimate the CAC, that's a deadline, or the company house, about the status of your business. That is the returns. They won't ask you for money, but what they do is that, they want to see your tax clearance in the UK. So that means that you must first of all go to Her Majesty Revenue and Custom and pay your tax clearance. That means that you must have an audited account. That means then they want to see whether you have remitted your staff payee and national insurance, payee and NI. They want to see whether you have remitted. So like what they do in this country, where including government companies, government-owned companies, will deduct payee from staff accounts. We deduct NSITF, deduct all sorts of things, NHF from staff account and refuse to remit. Sometimes some of the unscrupulous big men and all of that in those organizations will use such money as slush funds. It should never happen. So I think that's the point where CAC is getting to. So to say that, look, as a matter of fact, last year there was a report by the same CAC. Out of about 3.5 million companies that should actually be rendering returns. Remember, the returns is not the taxes. The returns is the status of the company. Only 190,000 companies have rendered returns as of 2019. That was a report from CAC. 190,000 companies out of 3.5 million companies that should render returns, right? And the companies that render returns are maybe those that are looking for government contracts are the ones because the government will ask you. And of course, even that one can be forged anyway because there's a lot of forged documents going around. There's also a problem with the issue of seal. The government has said, a company doesn't need the common seal anymore. Before you would go to, in Abuja here, it's called Area 10, to go and get a seal. It costs about 3,000 or 3,500 in order to affix. However, what you find out in Nigeria is anybody can go to Area 10 and get a seal of any company. We have instances in this country where, when companies are looking they're trying to bid for contracts, you make copies of all your company documents, your CAC2, CAC7, and all of that, and send to those companies. People go there, they grab those documents, they just make a photocopy, they go to a bank, and, in collaboration with customer service officer, they open an account in your company name. And then they can bring in and launder money through that company name. Some people discover this only when they go to FRS to go and look, to go and do their taxes. That's when sometimes you find out that in the name of your company, the certain withholding tax or VAT has been deducted, which you never knew of, and monies have gone through the name of your company in a different bank that you are not aware of. So now, in terms of the seal, in a place like the UAE, they've substituted all that for stamp. They are very strict about it. But before you can get a company stamp in the UAE, you must take the originals of your registration certificate, which even the stamp making company can confirm online to ensure that, number one, you know that you are the owner of that company, and also that certificate that you have brought is genuine and is still relevant. If it's an expired certificate, which is issued every year, they will not take it. So we have a long way to go, but I would say that the earlier the better. Our people say is when you wake up that is good morning. So maybe the CAC is waking up. I also don't believe that they are taking on too much regarding the NGOs. If it can come under their purview, so be it, all right? Because, again, the Charities Commission idea has been muted for too long and been killed. However, we see that in our country, of course, some of the religious organizations control a ton of money. And, you know, when that amount of money is flowing, of course, government should be interested in what goes on with the money. There's nothing wrong. In fact, some of the religious organizations, in my suggestion, could be the next level of industrial development in this country. In a place like the US, a lot of such organizations like churches and mosques, they own HMO organizations, they own hospitals, they own all sorts. Even in this country, we all grew up going to Methodist Boys High School, Loyola Jesuit Secondary School. We went to the Catholic hospitals, the Baptist hospital, the Methodist hospitals, and so on. And those are the legacies we grew up with. So in a way, I think the whole idea of an NGO regulation is to ensure that an NGO that collects money from the public, no matter what the NGO is, and of course, religious organizations are also grouped under NGOs, they actually use the money for charity. Look at the COVID season now. You want to ensure that, okay, if their money is coming in, that they're actually reaching out to people, you know, to homeless people. They are reaching out to people that are suffering ill health and so on. So basically, I think it's on track, subject to a few things. That like I said earlier on, what the folks from that corner of the country are complaining about is that the bill or the act only goes to talk about how we can remove your trustees, you know, if we don't like their faces, and of course some unwieldy level of power to say, you know, in public interest, which is solely going to be determined by the CAC alone. That is not good enough. Yeah, they didn't see. You could actually, do a lot more with that act. You could actually give a certain time frame to say that we're going to ask you first time, second time, third time. If you don't do this, then we do this. But if the reasonability is subject to the whims and caprices of a single entity, and of course maybe the big man in that entity, then you have a problem. I think it's the same problem we had with our political parties recently, and why some of us are in court with them, and of course there's a certain appeal court decision because we felt that
I know you can go on till tomorrow. I know you can go on till tomorrow, but we've got more questions to ask, and we're running out of time. So, Mr. Eze, how much do you think that this act will improve ease of doing business in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. This act is an icing on the cake of the work of the Presidential Enabling PEBEC, Enabling Committee on Presidential Enabling Business Environment Committee, headed by the Vice President. Actually, we already had executive orders before the act. And some of the ways it will help, for instance, holding meetings, virtual meetings, without requiring many people, they must come at a physical point, is going to assist so many people. We know people who have left their abode abroad just to come and attend some of these meetings. So it's going to go a long way in that regard. Then it's also an immediate instance, limited liability partnerships. In January this year, a company, a limited liability partnership in one of the East African countries, briefed a law firm of which I'm involved in for a registration of limited liability partnership in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we had to tell them that it was not provided in our CAMA. So they were compelled to register a limited liability company. So this has been cured under Part C of CAMA 2020, which has provided for
I'm sorry,
a
we've
limited
run
liability
completely
partnership,
out of time.
and Part D, which has provided for limited partnership.
Mr. Eze, I am sorry. I mean, we've run completely out of time. Granted, we haven't really done much about this CAMA because there's so much to look at in this act. But thank you all the same for joining us this morning. Mr. Chukwemeka Eze, lecturer, Faculty of Law, Nasarawa State University, KEFI, as well as Mr. Tokwe Fashua, an economist. Thank you very much for coming to at least try and analyze this act for us this morning. Sunrise will return in just a moment with another interesting conversation. Do stay with us.